Hi, good day, and welcome to the book review of Trauma to PTSD, Root Causes to Healing Branches. Today I'm having joined with me three doctors and a member of the US military. We have Dr. Mansi, Dr. Kierstin DeWitt, and Dr. Cynthia here joining in together with Staff Sergeant Edwards of the New York Army National Guard. So I want to say a special thanks to each one of you guys for joining in today. All of you guys were part of my review team. And I think some of you guys knew each other before, some didn't. But today I'm happy to bring all of you guys together. Each one of you guys had an opportunity to review the book on your own. So now it's a chance to sort of do it as a group review. So I want to say thanks again for each and every one of you guys for taking this opportunity today to join in the book review. So anybody want to start by giving a quick introduction of themselves? All right,
Well,
Sergeant Edwards.
Sergeant Edwards, right? NCOs, I gotta lead. Well, my name is Gerald Edwards, and I've been sober now for, no, I'm sorry, wrong meeting, I apologize. No, well, my name is Gerald Edwards. I've known Randland here for a number of years. I want to say about, what, about 10 years. Yeah, about 10 years I've known Randland here. We met in the military, and, we deployed together, 16, 17. I've watched him progress from being a soldier in the military to becoming a doctor. I've seen his struggles, with school and back and forth and the whole thing, just the whole thing, working with it, to deploying and coming back, and him dealing with PTSD, myself dealing with PTSD. And sometimes the only thing that helps was just conversation, when he traveled back, we'll have conversations, the little things that's affecting us, but as I said, we've been in the military. I've been in the military. This is my 14th year in the military. Staff sergeant, looking to get promoted here soon. I have full blown, as you would say, family life, everything going. Three kids, wife. No pets except for some goldfishes that my son have. But I studying to become a chaplain, a chaplain in the army, and a pastor on the civilian side, and just trying to live life and trying to help as many people as I can. As I spoke about in the review, and I often speak to my peers that I deployed with and those that I haven't, that's in the military, to, hey, seek help. The best thing to do is just speak. But again, I don't want to take up the whole time. Someone else can go.
Who wants to go next? Dr. Kierstin.
Oh, I think it looked like Cynthia was ready, so.
Doesn't matter to me.
Either one's fine. For some reason you cut out for a while. I don't know why, but there you are.
So I'm Dr. Cynthia Monteil. I know Dr. Radley because we went to school together in Connecticut and had some long extended study time. And I now practice in the state of Montana in a small town and deal a lot with veterans and military. The county that I practice in has the highest rate of military and active duty military veterans as well in the state of Montana, and through most of the United States. Actually, our rates are very high. I think people are very attracted to Montana because of its isolation, not being around a whole lot of people. And I also am married to a veteran with an extensive military background who suffers from PTSD. And we are currently kind of walking that road and trying to get him through a significant healing journey too.
Thank you, Dr. Cindy. Dr. Kierstin.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Dr. Kierstin, also a naturopathic physician and acupuncturist. And so I also work in a addiction rehabilitative facility utilizing acupuncture and meditation and mindfulness. And so PTSD and addiction often go hand in hand. So it's something that I definitely see. And with addiction in my family, it's just a very, in trauma, it's just a very kind of near and dear topic to myself. And so I'm just so grateful for Dr. Radley to be putting out the information and education that he does, because he does it in such a clear and concise and accessible way. So thank you so much for creating this space and creating this wonderful resource for people to just gain a better understanding and awareness of what PTSD can look like, how different it can look in different people, different circumstances. I think it really just helps to, again, build that awareness and also to give people a little bit of better understanding of themselves and those around them. So thank you so much, Dr. Radley.
No problem. Thank you too. And Dr. Mansi.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Mansi Vira. I'm practicing currently out of New Jersey. And I went to school with Dr. Radley as well. I guess the last 2-ish years post-military. So I had the fortune to also read some of his poems and learn a lot about Dr. Radley through his writing. And I mean, not only was it beautiful and poetic, but it was also very enlightening to me to learn what a veteran goes through, what PTSD looks like firsthand almost. So that was kind of, it was a very interesting experience. It was the first time kind of encountering something like that. So I'm very thankful I got to do that. I also got to experience Dr. Radley in the clinic, doing acupuncture, doing craniosacral therapy on others and myself. So just seeing how passionate he is about this field, this topic, it's kind of, it's needed and on all fronts, I think, especially the year that we've had, or almost 2 years we've had. But it's also made me realize in my own healing journey, trauma is so deep rooted. And I think all of us almost have some type of trauma that if we don't ever deal with, it kind of just re-manifests in different ways until it can get really out of control. And so, the book, the writing, the way you've talked about trauma, PTSD, and how we can heal from it is it's just so needed and so well done. And I'm grateful that you're putting this out to the public. I think everyone needs it.
Thank you, Dr. Mansi. And one of my goals with the book really is to sort of bring more awareness to the topic. Oftentimes trauma and PTSD, the first thing you think of is military. And what I try to do with the book itself is bring it beyond just the military. The military is definitely a high risk factor for developing PTSD, but there's also tons of risk factors that lead up to it. And like Sergeant Edwards said, and even from myself, you as a soldier and you go overseas, you are definitely exposed to a lot of different things, varying factors. But beyond that, there's a life before you join the military. And a lot of times, the life experiences that we have even before the military could actually increase the risk of one developing PTSD. So that was one of the goals of doing the book, really, from my part. It's not just to highlight that in terms of the military aspect of it, but also to highlight where else we could see trauma happening, where else we could see those risk factors sort of developing and creating an issue for individuals as they go through whatever career path that they do choose. So my first question to each of you guys now is, what are your thoughts on the topic of trauma and PTSD in general?
Well, it's a big topic, right? So, but the way that you help to break it down, like I said, you just are able to communicate in an accessible way, how it can present, the different types, the triggers, just like, I mean, you really pull together a very comprehensive look at trauma and PTSD. And like I mentioned, just with working with addiction, um, everyone in there has a story, right? And I think it's so easy to kind of, we just see the aftermath often. And it's so easy to kind of stereotype people who deal with PTSD or addiction or trauma. But with gaining a deeper awareness and understanding of the risk factors and just really understanding the ways in which trauma can impact us for the rest of our lives, right? If we don't have the proper support and care and understanding and environment, then we can start to gain more compassion and understanding. And then from there, more resources can become available. And so just having these conversations and these resources, I think are fundamental, because like Dr. Mansi said, you know, we all experience some form of trauma in our life, and it's the resiliency and the tools in our environment and our community, all of these different factors that really can determine how we go from there. You know, and like you address in the book, there's different types of trauma, there's different levels of trauma. And so it's just really important to be aware and cognizant, because you know, you bring up some of the triggers, right? Without being trauma informed, you may be unknowingly triggering someone that's, you know, maybe you're working with, or they're your family or member, or a friend, or just someone in the community. And so again, just like was mentioned before, I just think it's so important to have a greater awareness as a community. And so this book, although it's geared towards those who have experienced trauma and PTSD, it's really for anyone, because again, the awareness leads to greater resources and compassion and better understanding, creating just a healthier environment for everyone. So I just think it's just so important to be informed so that we can create a better environment. So.
Just to piggyback on your point there, Dr. Kierstin, the book definitely is for everyone. One thing that I experienced when I came back, I couldn't speak to my spouse. I couldn't speak to a regular person about this. Why? Because I felt as if they couldn't understand. You know, they couldn't understand where I was coming from. They weren't there with me, so they couldn't understand. But I open up when I speak to, for instance, Radley, or I speak to one of the guys that I deployed with, or maybe even just somebody in the uniform, you know, because I believe they have some kind of understanding from where I am. And I think this book here bridges that gap. You know, anyone could read it, and then now they could understand where, because, you know, there's this belief that PTSD is not real. You know, I once told a congregation, you know, PTSD to some is like cancer is to you. You know, we take it to that level. It's a real serious thing, and you know, there are different levels of understanding when it comes to this, and I think this book breaks it down on a very minuscule level that everyone could understand. You know, which is awesome. I really love the book when it comes to, you know, how deep you go in, and as you said, it's not only about military. It's different traumas that happen throughout life. Sometimes the little things, the little triggers. You know, that's one of my favorite part. But I won't go in that yet. We're not there yet. But you know, it's the little things that happen little things in life that trigger certain things. And I tell you, man, this time here, that's like one of my worst times. You know, one of my worst times is in July 4th, this whole fireworks stuff. You know, that's one of my worst times dealing with it. You know, but I just, you know, circle myself with family, and I mantra, and I just focus on, Almighty to get me through. But again, love the book. I love what you're doing here. You know, you you definitely did your research, because I know it affects more than just military people. You know, and in having a conversation with my fellow battle buddies, other soldiers, I try to speak to them like, hey, before it's like, I remember I have, not gonna mention names, but I have a guy he's been in twice as long as I've been. When I came back, and my wife would told me, hey, you're different, you're different. I was like, nah, I'm good. It's the same person. Nothing changed. I didn't see it until I saw it, after she told me a couple of times. And then I started thinking to myself, how many of the guys that I came back with, females I came back with, that's dealing with this, and they don't see it like I didn't see it, and I didn't really have, I went looking for stuff, and it's not really a lot out there on PTSD, to say, hey, read this book. But then again, you're dealing with, some people that don't want to read or don't like to read. So, the what you call it, the I apologize. The worksheets. You could print out the worksheets, and you could use the worksheets, to say, hey, how do you relate on the cycle? What are some of your triggers? And it's things that, it gets them in their mind, and they start jogging their minds. I actually, one of my friends recently, he reached out to me. He's like, hey man, I appreciate you for talking to me. I went to the VA, and I'm seeking help. They say I'm 100%. He's 100% with PTSD disability. So, and he didn't notice. He thought, his drinking habits was just normal. And this guy would drink himself to sleep and drink himself awake. So it's one of the things that, we deal with as human beings, and we just have to figure out the right ways of coping with it, and information really helps.
Thank you for sharing, Sergeant Edwards. I saw Dr. Cindy have a mic off, so you could go ahead.
Yeah, I feel like, to piggyback off of both of you, really the key word here is compassion. And this book led to all of that. And that was by the way that you broke it down. And it's concise, and it applies to everyone, because I feel like a lot of people are in that trauma cycle, and we just don't quite understand it as a society. And so to be able to read it the way it was put in this book spurs that compassion and that understanding, and allows us to really come at it from a different angle that we aren't offered anyplace else. So.
Thank you for sharing, Dr. Mansi.
Yeah, so kind of, just reiterating what everyone said so far, and that I was going to say similarly to Dr. Cynthia, just the compassion and how it makes us more aware to be able to empathize with more people when we normalize PTSD and trauma. It is really, everyone's kind of suffering from it in some ways or another. With my own healing journey, and also just being more aware, I'm realizing so many of the clients I'm seeing right now all have so much trauma that they've never talked about, never felt like, it was affecting them physiologically, physically, but it really is. It doesn't all have to manifest, with some type of mental, emotional, it can manifest in any which way. So it's just something that I feel like I'm appreciating this awareness around it, and I hope I can grow from this too. And I think, Dr. Radley, like, just thank you so much for bringing the light to this topic, and really inspiring people to make it more normal, and more normal to talk about it, because as a culture, I think we're so you know, we're in a culture that celebrates the superficialness of life. If we're not celebrating something, if we're not happy, then there's something wrong with us. But I think more often than not, that also is a sign of some trauma that's trapped. And then when it comes out, it will come out in a really, you know, harmful way, either self-harm or towards other people. So I think as a culture, it's so important to embrace trauma, PTSD, and how to even approach people. And the way you've illustrated it in your book is so well done.
Thank you. And that leads to my next question. I guess you guys sort of covered and touched on your thoughts on the book, but if you want to expand on that, but also in addition to while expanding on your general thoughts of the book, I would like to know your favorite part of the book. I know Sergeant Edwards started touching a little bit on his part of it, so who wants to go first?
Well, I think Dr. Mansi, you want to go? Dr. Mansi, you want to take the floor? Yeah, your mic was off. That's why. Well, all right. So again, as I touched on prior, one of the favorite things reading through the book, you know, it breaks down stuff. It gives you a better understanding of, you know, the PTSD and how, you know, to deal with it. You know, but I feel like, to be honest, I'm dealing with soldiers, you know, and some of these soldiers, they just want to go, 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 go. It's hard to get them to sit and say, read this book, you know, they will read it whenever time they get, but like on the fly, you know, like oftentimes the most I have is maybe an hour or 30 minutes to just have a conversation with someone, you know, if I could pull one of these worksheets out, you know, I could pull the cycle of abuse, thing out and say, hey, you know, look at this, you know, where are you on this thing right here? You know, this triggers a different part of a conversation, you know, the what you call it, the next one that I love, the event and trigger. This is the one that I use for myself, you know, as I'm reading through the book, and I was like, it's like every time I read something, it's like, hey, I could relate to that. You know, you know, it's one of those things where when you could relate to the book, it's hitting certain points, it's hitting certain highs, certain lows, and it's like, wow. And then I get to the part where now the event and the trigger, as I said, July 4th. We got attacked on July 4th, Radley, if you could remember, in Al-Assad, and it was 02 in the morning when, you know, they started raining bombs down at us. And that morning was a very emotional morning for me, because I got up, and when I realized how close that bomb hit to where I was sleeping, I realized that I could have not gone home. I could have not made it from that. And, you know, and I did not know that in that instance, that was what caused my PTSD, you know, incorporated with the whole deployment. And this, you know, what event, you know, what triggers. So as I said, you know, with the fireworks and stuff, I remember last year I couldn't even sleep. I was in my sleep. I fell asleep before the fireworks, got really excited. And I remember just doing that, jumping out of my sleep. And I literally, you know, went and find my wife like a little child, like, hey, babe, something is wrong, you know, and it builds anxiety and stuff like that. But, you know, with these worksheets, it helped to pinpoint what it is, where it is, what's causing it, you know, the alcohol abuse, the little things that you might do that you might think is normal. You know, the book points out some of those things, you know, and again, I love that it's not just, you know, it's not biased towards military. Dr. Riley, I applaud you for that. You're a military man, but, you know, you took yourself outside of that and you wrote it so that everyone could relate to it, you know, because again, PTSD is not only overseas or military. You could have a car accident, you could have something happen in your life, and, you know, it triggers certain things. But definitely those charts, crisis plan, those things, I haven't done my crisis plan yet, but I'll get to it. But, you know, those things help. They help a lot when dealing with people when you don't have a lot of time to have to go in the whole detail. You know, I think I don't know if it's, you know, maybe an idea. The suicide prevention, they have like little cards where they try to, you know, you could unfold it and the main points, main things. Maybe some of these charts, if you know, it could be your next thing there, Dr. Rodley. You know, hey, you know, for somebody like me to walk around with, like, hey, you know, hey, look, where are you on this? So I don't have to pull it up on my phone. It's more relatable. I got something right in front of them. You know, just little ideas here and there. But man, listen, I appreciate you. I appreciate this book. You know, it helps a lot. You know, in conversation with soldiers. You know, the little things that help, and information is great to have. Right? Thank you.
Who wants to go next?
I can go. There's also a storm here, so if I cut out, it's because of the storm.
Oh, that's fine. We have one in Trinidad too, so.
Okay, well, good.
If I cut out, you know why.
So yeah, actually very similarly, and first of all, I want to say thank you for sharing that vulnerability and sharing your experience, because that was, you know, very insightful, and it shows a lot of courage to even talk about it. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
And I think similarly to you, I feel that the worksheets were super helpful, because it's one thing to read about something or, you know, passively learn about something, but at any point in time, I feel like true healing, whatever level it is, happens when you're actively working on it. And so the worksheets are that conduit to actually work on it. So those are my favorite also, because it's just a way to, you know, really pull it out of your system, to break it down, and to really analyze it. Because then once you've identified the root cause of the problem, it often, you know, that's half the battle. And then you can work on it. But I also really did like the part of ancestral trauma and healing from that, because it's something that, you know, culturally it's so talked about, or like curses, or, you know, in our culture that's such a big thing. They call it nazar, and it's something that it's like very personal to me right now as well on my healing journey, or whatever you can call that. But it brought to light an aspect that people don't talk about at all, but, you know, oftentimes is the root cause for that individual, and you can't figure out, you have this medical mystery, nothing's working, nothing's helping, you're seeing hundreds of doctors, and maybe, you know, you just have to go in and really start praying to your ancestors. And I know we had this conversation too, Dr. Radley, but just putting it out there in the book and kind of introducing this concept that is ancient to many cultures, but also new in many ways, I think was really, really helpful.
Thank you for sharing, Dr. Mansi. Dr. Cindy.
I would have to say the same thing as them. I think that the worksheets were fabulous. Not that the book didn't give so much information, but it really allows us to apply all of the knowledge that you so wonderfully and clearly and concisely laid out. And it gives us a real life application for it, where we can use it with people and help them to get out of that trauma cycle, or at least recognize it. And a lot of people aren't able to do that. And as Dr. Mansi said, when we're looking at the root cause of things, it's a huge hurdle that we have to get over. So to be able to have those worksheets, to be able to show people that they can work through it themselves, and it empowers them as well, that they don't feel as lost. It's definitely one of my favorite parts of the book. And I would also have to say that the ancestral part definitely interested me, and I really liked that too. It was probably my second favorite one if I had to choose.
Dr. Kierstin.
So the whole book, but there's definitely a couple of things that stood out to me as I was reading. One of them also being the ways in which it can look through people. So you talk about there's the victim, the numb one, the fighter, and those who made it, right? And I think it's just really important to just to showcase how differently it can show up for people, because, you know, maybe we think just because they're quiet or they don't talk about something that they're fine, or, you know, there's just different ways that it can kind of show up in someone's life, and the ways that it can impact their relationships and their ability to connect with others. And, you know, so this is, again, why I just think it's so important for not just those who have experienced trauma or have experienced and are experiencing PTSD, but for the loved ones and for parents and for literally everybody, so that we can better understand the different ways that it can turn up for people. And I also agree with Dr. Mansi, because with transgenerational trauma and just the different ways, there's just so much more information coming out, even the genetic links, right, of how transgenerational trauma can impact us genetically and kind of set us up or increase our risk for PTSD in the future. And I think it's so important to, again, bring awareness to that, so that we know when we're making our life choices, is this a good choice for me to travel abroad or to travel in, you know, high risk areas, or to do, you know, to join the military, or to do these things that, you know, if we have an increased risk for PTSD, I think it's just, again, really important to understand our history. And I've even seen cases where, for instance, there was a young girl who didn't understand where the trauma really originated, and it was when they were in the womb, right? Their mother was fighting for their lives with abuse, and that's really, you know, what was the trigger and the trauma. But had she not been aware that looking back that far may be necessary, that, you know, awareness may have never come, right? Or just that understanding of how deeply rooted some trauma can be. You know, it's hard to move on from that, hard to be able to heal from that without really understanding how far back some of this can go. And then thinking about the, you know, racial trauma, and for women as well, right? Like safety, just feeling safe in our own bodies, and how much that can impact our choices. And yeah, there's so much to it. And so I'm glad that you really incorporated so many different aspects to trauma and PTSD. And again, that's what's so great about this book, as well as the worksheets, as well as all of the different steps and tools that you give for us to be able to become more resilient and to make those changes and to seek help when we need it. So yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Kierstin. So I wanted to share my favorite part of the book as well. And my favorite part was actually the comfort and trauma part. And like Sergeant Edwards said, with the military, it's a tough thing. When you get back home, you never know who could relate to what. And I wrote comfort and trauma. I would say a lot of it is from the heart itself, because when I came back home, it took me a long time before I asked for help. And it took a lot of people pushing me towards asking for help. And you get back home and you feel like it's normal. Whatever you feel, and it's normal. You don't ever see yourself as being changed. You don't understand the effects of what has happened to you when you serve overseas. It could be from very minor trauma to very major traumas. But when you're there overseas and you live in a a repetitive life, it becomes, you have to find some sort of comfort. You have to find your comfort within the trauma itself, and you become so comfortable with it that it becomes routine. So anything else that happens outside of that, it feels abnormal. So I know when I came back home, I had a very difficult time readjusting to being back home. I would go nights on and off without sleep, 3-4 nights without any sleep at all. I would get up, I would lie on my bed, wake up, jump out of bed, shower, go to clinic, go to classes, come back home, repeat the cycle, study for exams, and not able to sleep for 2 or 3 days until I have a crash day. And it started reflecting in my grades. Physically, I don't think anybody really knew what was going on because I kept going. I kept finding things to do and keeping myself busy. And I got so comfortable with that even happening while on deployment. I got so comfortable with certain sounds being a background sound that when I came back home, the first good night of sleep I actually had was a night when the helicopters was flying over Bridgeport. And it reminded me of being overseas. You have that helicopter background sound there. So I found comfort in certain things. Even now, when it comes to falling asleep, it's difficult for me. If I'm in a room and wherever the bed's located, I have to sleep closest to the wall. And that's the only way that I could fall asleep. And that comes from when we were overseas, we slept in sea bunkers. And the sea bunkers are pretty much not that big. It's enough for your bunk bed to be.
While he's figuring that out, I definitely could relate to what he just said. You know, I came back and there's no way I would sit anywhere with my back to the door. You know, I have to see everyone that's coming in my direction. Even if I'm at a children's party, you know, I came back, I couldn't sleep. Doc Riley, are you ready? Still not hearing you though. You know, yeah, and definitely, you know, the sleeping thing. It was a big issue, you know, and even then, going through all of that, I did not realize. I kept telling myself the same person that left is the same person that came back. You know, and it takes a strong woman, I tell you. You know, my wife, she dealt with it, and you know, when I lost my temper, I would get angry, I punch hole in the wall. I went through the whole high and the whole low with this thing, you know, and I kept telling myself, same person that left, same person that came back, because I told myself that before I went, you know. So coming back, it was in my head. I kept playing that recorded in my head, the same person that left, same person that came back, but I didn't look at who I was prior to who I came back as, you know. And I definitely relate to what Dr. Riley was saying in that sense.
Yeah, and thank you both for sharing about that. And I think for me that was an important part of the book, because I think so often we judge people, right, for maybe going back into similar situations that kind of put them in to trauma, or back into, you know, relationships or these environments, right? And I think that part of the book really helps to illustrate why that is, right? And unless, again, going back to the compassion and awareness, like unless we understand that, it's going to be really hard for us to be able to support people when that's, you know, the behavior that they're doing. So yeah, thank you for speaking to that, to both of you. Right?
It did, yeah.
Okay.
So I know every time I try sharing my story, something like this happened. When I did the Your Healthy Mind Summit with Dr. Kierstin, very similar event happened with an automatic cutoff. But I was saying that comfort and trauma is basically my favorite part because I wrote it from the heart. I know when I came back home, even like how Sergeant Edwards said, I felt comfortable with being who I am. I felt comfortable thinking, and I kept repeating the same thing he said, nothing changed. I'm the same person that went overseas and I came back home. The only difference is probably I lost some weight and whatever. and probably get a couple degrees extra tan. But that was about it that I saw as a change. I didn't see anything mentally being affected or being changed. And it's not until people started pointing it out more and more to me, then I realized what was going on. And like I said, sleeping next to the wall, it's still something that I do. I mean, sometimes it's easy to fall asleep without being next to the wall, but I would say maybe more than 90% of the time I still have that, where if I don't stay next to the wall, facing the wall, I don't feel comfortable enough to fall asleep. Sometimes I have to put on the fan just to give that background sound to help me fall asleep. So that's why this is sort of like my favorite part of the book, because I saw it in patients and I saw it in myself. I mean, a lot of the book, it correlates to both sides of it, what I've seen with patients, what I've seen with myself. And that's what inspired me to expand the book. For those who know, I did my thesis on it, and I expanded my thesis from there, and is kind of where I built my book. When I talked to the publisher, one of her first questions was, who is going to be your target audience for it? And I decided that I think while in schools, yes, you learn about PTSD, it's still not enough. I feel like more the general population feels comfortable talking about this topic, the more likely that they would bring it up with their provider. And it would eventually force the provider themselves to learn more about it as well. And even when they understand the effects of their trauma, then it's more likely that they could heal from certain issues. So again, a lot of it stemmed from all the way back to learning of my thesis. That's why there's so much information in there. It's because it's how I did my thesis, and then just keep expanding as I got more and more experience of my own personal experience, and then working with patients. I've talked to a couple of you guys on different levels that I've learned things from as well. Even from when we did the Facebook Live, Dr. Kierstin, I learned from you, Dr. Mansi, Dr. Cynthia, and Sergeant Edwards. Like, you guys have all shared part of your story with me, and I've learned from even those things. So that was one of the reasons why I was happy that you guys were part of my review team for reviewing the book, because I wanted to make sure that I don't just get my perspective on it. I wanted to see what else everybody else thought about the book itself. So again, thank you guys for being open to reviewing, being open to coming here today to do this. And I have one more question for you guys, but that requires me sharing my screen. Let me see if I could pull it up real quick. So my question really was, what do you guys think about the cover, and what is your favorite cover of all? So I wanted to pull the picture up so that you guys could both see, you guys could all see the two covers of the book. One's a white background, one's a black background. I know when I was choosing the backgrounds and choosing the cover for itself, I asked a lot of people for their preference, and these two actually turned out to be the top two. I decided, why not give the options to people to choose which one they like. So I want to ask you guys as well here, what is your preferred cover style or cover out of these two? Who wants to go first?
For me, it's the white one.
Okay.
Me, it's the white one.
Any
the black
reason?
The black one to me seems a little bit ominous. It seems like a little bit more. The whole, it just looks somewhat like a horror movie type, like some of you seen a horror movie. You know, the way it presents itself, like it forms some kind of a wing or some. You know, maybe it's the black part of it that's just popping out to me. But I believe that the white is more softer in the eyes. You know, with the blue tone colors. You know, with the blue shirt and the guy, and you know, there's the roots coming out. You see it more. You understand it more from that. You know, from reading the name of the book, right? You could relate more to this cover. I could relate more to this cover because I could see it more, you know, if that makes sense.
Fair enough.
I actually like the black one because I think because it makes me think of Man's Search for Meaning. That book is a black cover, and it's, you know, a very healing book. So, and I think just it almost looks a little more minimal. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Geez, you guys, like, you just, Dr. Kierstin, you just totally changed my opinion. But my first go-to was the one with the white cover. It just drew my eye a little more, and I felt like it kind of gave me more of like a calmness, maybe, and more of it exuded healing to me, anyways.
Yeah, same thing. Dr. Kierstin, you totally changed my mind. I can see and appreciate the darker cover. But again, similarly to the others, the other two, my go-to was the white as well. I think blue is just, it's probably more biased too, but blue is just more soothing to me. And I feel like the features of the elephant were more prominent in that setting for whatever reason. I just felt like it was just more easily seeable. And yeah, the calming effect of the blue for me.
Thank you, Dr. Mansi. And it's kind of similar when I asked around about the different covers. I got different feedback. I actually had some people more drawn towards the black, and because of different reasons, I've had some people drawn more towards the white with the blue. So this actually, in terms of votes, they both actually got the same number of votes in total when I tallied up everything. So that's why I decided to go with the options. But what I learned from doing that exercise was that a lot of people see different things, and I wanted to use that sort of like as an analogy to how PTSD basically works, right? And how healing from it works. Just like everybody has a different opinion or a different draw towards one of the cover versus the other, it's the same thing when it comes to healing from PTSD. Everybody has something that it's sort of innate within them that they have a specific draw towards. So some people are very easy to speak. Like they could come in and they would walk in and they would spill every beans about everything from the day they were born till the second that they walked into the room. And there's some people that need time. Some people are more expressive. They need more of an expressive type. So some people would prefer things like writing or drawing or coloring or art. Some people would prefer something more on the lines of maybe even utilizing like animal therapy or plant therapy, or be drawn to herbal medicine versus pharmaceuticals. And to me, one of the goals of the book is to bring the awareness that it doesn't matter which one you choose. The idea is finding which one works best for you as an individual seeking out help for PTSD, because they all have some degree of validity behind them. And just like we all have a different perspective and draw towards each one of the covers, it's kind of the same thing when it comes towards healing. We have to figure out what works best for us, what's most comfortable for us. And I'm gonna share a little bit about my story as well. When I was going for therapy, it took me over a year to actually start opening up about what was really bothering me, because I did talk therapy for more than a year. And then it was not until one day I was talking to one of the doctors and I mentioned to her that I use writing as sort of my getaway. I use it as something that I use to decompress from stress and stuff like that. And that's when she said, I actually just learned about something called written exposure therapy. Would you be willing to try it? And I agreed. And the next week when I had my follow-up appointment with her, we started doing that. And that was the first day that I actually felt the biggest relief from that, just doing one session of written exposure therapy. And that's how I learned that a lot of times it's really finding what you are most comfortable with what is your individual way of getting something out rather than being forced out, because some people may not necessarily talk very easily. So something like talk therapy may not be their best option. Some people may hate art, so they would never be drawn towards using art. Some people may like writing and they could write everything down in 10 minutes that they would take 2 years to speak about. So that was one of the reasons why I asked this specific question, just to show it doesn't out that different people chose different covers, because it showed just like I said, in terms of like when it comes to healing, different people may be drawn towards different things. And I'm happy that it worked out that not everybody chose the same one, because then it would be difficult to demonstrate that. So I'm happy for that aspect of it. So once again, I want to say a special thanks to each and every one of you guys for taking time out to be here today. I'm going to leave the floor open for you guys to ask any questions that you guys want. And hopefully this time my mic doesn't cut out when I have to answer. So any specific questions that you guys have for me?
Yeah, my question is, when are you gonna come and do the book signing?
As soon as the borders open up and it's travelable to get out and get back in easily, I definitely do it. My goal is before the end of the year, definitely. I'm hoping sooner than later in the year itself. So again, I would keep you guys updated on when I'm doing that. But I definitely want to do it. I definitely want to make a trip and at least come out there and do some sort of book signing as well, just to help promote the book as well. So not just through social media, but actually being there in person. So.
Awesome, thank you.
Any other questions?
What was your biggest challenge with writing the book?
A lot of it was uncomfortable. It wasn't difficult to write it. It was more uncomfortable to read it. Because writing it, I felt like it was more of a relief, like getting things out that I saw in patients and that I saw even within myself. But when it came to editing and rereading the book, it was tough, because I had to actually, to me, I felt overwhelmed reading the book, because I could relate to so much different things on so much different levels. At least that was the first time I reread it. The more I reread it, it becomes easier. But I feel like in terms of writing the book, it was easier to write it because I've done a lot of presentations on different topics relating to PTSD. I've working with my thesis and stuff like that was already sort of like a basis to do it. I wrote an article for the acupuncture program, and I won a scholarship about the use of acupuncture for PTSD. So that scholarship actually allowed me to be able to go to China to do a 2 weeks clinical rotation there to learn more about acupuncture in its homeland. So I wrote a couple times about it. In PTSD, actually also have an article published in NDNR about PTSD and naturopathic medicine. So the writing part was easier than the rereading and editing part for me.
I'd like to know where people can buy the book, and if they want to work with you virtually, can they do that?
So yes, they're working with me virtually. My email address is universal3hc@gmail.com. My Facebook and Instagram pages are both the same, Universal 3 Health Clinic, just because that's the name of my clinic. So either one of those are means to contact me. I also just started my YouTube channel, so it's Dr. Radley Ramdan. So you could follow me there as well. And there was one other thing that you asked.
Where can they buy the book?
Where could you buy the book? So www.traumatoptsd.com would give you the link to, currently it's in for pre-orders. It would be officially released on the 15th of July. And then I guess you'd call it sales at that point in time. But www.traumatoptsd.com would bring you towards where you could get the print version of the book. In that is also a link towards the Amazon page to get the book as well. So it's available as an ebook on Amazon, and it's available for print on www.traumatoptsd.com.
So I know you have the challenge associated with this, which is great. I'm looking forward to that. But I was wondering if at some point you would be willing to do like a book club / like reading parts of your book live on social media and then like having a conversation around it in real time, because I think that would be so amazing for people to understand and see where the inspiration came from, learn about healing, trauma, all of that.
Thank you for that question. I'm actually thinking about doing that. I just need to figure out when would be sort of like the best timing in terms of allowing more people to get the book before I start doing it. So I'm thinking about maybe doing it once a month or probably every 2 months. Do one event where I would pick a specific part of the book, or I would leave it open to like a Q&A session and people would ask specific questions about the book and I sort of answer it there. But I do plan on doing something like that at least on a regular basis. Just because, not only to promote the book. Yes, I want the book to be promoted. I want as much people to buy it. But my biggest goal about writing this book really was just to get the information out to the extent that people feel comfortable talking about this topic, for it to be enough to be a conversation that people could have at home with friends in a casual conversation and not necessarily have that stigmatization of mental health, of PTSD, of dealing with trauma or stress associated with it. So that's my biggest goal with the book itself. So that's why I definitely do feel like I will be doing that. And I would leave it even accessible to people who don't have the book. It's not necessarily only for people who have the book, but at least for anybody who is interested in the topic, I would definitely be doing that for now.
That's awesome.
Any other questions for me? All right, seems like no other questions. So once again, I want to say a special thanks to each and every one of you guys for being part of the review team. I feel an honor to have all of you guys here today. Each one of you guys have your own unique way, and we all know each other from different settings. I had a long journey through school. I actually took 7 years to graduate from a program that was 4 years, so it gave me the opportunity to meet a broader spectrum of people from that. And a lot of it was because of adapting to the military and inclusive of my deployment. So it took me a little bit longer to get through my schooling. So I'm grateful for, while it was stressful dealing with that when it was there, looking back at it, it gave me a lot of valuable insight, a lot of valuable resources, and it even gave me an opportunity to be in contact with a lot more different people than if I did end up finishing school in 4 years. May not have happened. So I'm grateful for every little thing that do happen. And with that being said, I want to say to everyone that's listening to this book, don't let trauma sort of define you, rather let it refine you. Just like diamonds and a lot of precious gems, they have to go through all their rough periods. They have to go through some sort of stress and stuff like that before they become whatever shining gem they are. So don't let trauma stop you from growing. Allow it to give you an opportunity to grow. Don't just survive, rather thrive. So once again, thanks to each and every one of you guys for joining, and do look forward to working with each and every one of you guys in the near future.